Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Flo podcast. I'm so excited to have a friend of mine, Jonathan Carroll, here on the podcast. He is a transformational guide and life coach, and he owns a company called Title Transformation. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's so awesome to be here. I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Totally. So, as also a life coach, tell me a little bit about like what you do and what are those fundamental pieces that you really love to work with humans on?
Well, there's a jam-packed question right out of the gate. I help people to get in touch with their soul. You know, I think that we grow up in a world where there's so much programming, and we begin at an early age to start to fixate to that programming to find our bearings and to lead us in the direction that feels like the way we're supposed to or we should go. And then somewhere along the road, usually somewhere approaching maybe age 40 in the middle of our life, we start questioning whether we've been following the right track and questioning, is this it? Is this all there is to life? Am I as happy as I could be? What would make me happier? Maybe why am I not happy or more fulfilled in my life? And so people reach out to me, and I help them basically get tethered again to who they are and what their special gifts are, and to evoke that brilliance that's inside of everybody, that limitless potential.
I love that so much. Yeah. And like we have so many similarities in the work that we do, right? Because I love that you brought up about the programming and all this conditioning, and really like the world is so full of noise. It's a very noisy place, and right, like and so is our mind, right? When we get to a certain place. And I also love that you said like that we have these ideas that we should and we're supposed to. And like, really, that's like a fundamental piece. Like detaching from that is a fundamental piece of of standing in your soul.
Yeah. The fixation with the shoulds, you know, there's a common phrase in the coaching world of, you know, shoulding all over yourself. And
I've never heard that one yet. That's good.
Oh, right? Yeah, no, like when we're shitting all over ourselves, we're basically aligning ourselves with the voices of others, and we're not tuning into the voice that's within. And I think we get off track. We go way off track sometimes, thinking that we're put here to perform, to achieve, to be in existence for others. And I make a hard separation between having a soul mission or a cause that's in flow with serving the world versus performing actions and jumping through hoops because we think that's going to please others. Those are two very different things. And when we get connected to our soul purpose and what it is that we've been brought here to do, the types of amazing things that we're capable of, getting people to align with that really brings them back into focus with who they are. You know, that inner child that grew up and somewhere in the early ages started thinking about what they wanted to do with their life and the change they wanted to create in the world and the aspirations they had for themselves. And then what happens, we get to middle age and wonder like, oh, it's not playing out the way I thought it was. And sometimes that's wonderful that like we all take little forks in the road and it leads us to these amazing things, and everyone's exactly where they ought to be. But that doesn't mean that those realizations aren't telling you something about some deep inner change that you're seeking. And when that voice gets loud enough, sometimes it's the opportunity to raise your hand and look for a coach who helps with these types of things, like you or I.
Totally. And I think that's like the piece there is that like there are like you and I haven't done this alone, you know, like that, like we had that same experience of wait, what, where, how, you know, like, and not speaking for you, but like, I know we all kind of get to that point of like, okay, wanting to really fulfill that ultimate and that highest potential. Right. And one of the things that kind of came up when you were talking about that was like, as we grow up, we tend to align with safety over passion. Right. And so we tend to be like, okay, you know, I'm going to go and do this because I know that I can make X amount of dollars after I get out of college, and then I'm going to be stable and secure my whole life. And then I'm fine. That's what I want. That's good. And then we do all of that. And like, this actually happened to me like in a different way, where it was like, I did all of that. And then I got to my first job, and I was like, and this was like right as I was kind of coming more and more into spirituality. I was just like, okay, now I'm here. I made it. And then I got to this, I made it phase. Like, I got the degree, I finished, I got the first job that I dreamed of having. And then I got there and I was like, oh shit, this is it. And so in that moment, I had to like balance out like gratitude, right? Gratitude for being already in that space, and deep desire for something deeper, something a little more. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. The recipe that I think the vast majority of people follow towards success is somebody else's recipe. And then what inevitably happens is something tough bumps into us. Life bumps into us at some point, and we wake up. We've been in this zombie state, sort of doing the things that we've been told to do, and following the recipe that has been handed down to us. And when we bump into that thing that all of a sudden feels like we're off the tracks, we're drifting, we're untethered, we're confused, overwhelmed, then we start to question what's up here. Like, why am I not feeling myself? And when we can reach out for help, that's step number one. Then really you're moving in a direction now that's following your own inner guidance, because your guidance is telling you, I need help. And inevitably, when we look for someone who's going to help us, we're looking for somebody who's gone through it as well.
Yeah. And I think when we had a conversation before, and one of the things that you had said to me, and I would love for you to expand on and dive into, is this idea that like life is just a game. Like, this idea that this existence, that who we are, that what we're playing, that we're all just playing a game, and we get to choose, what moves we make in this game, and it's kind of like, I've actually been like on this like binge of watching Survivor, but this is like real, it's kind of like this real life, highest potential survivor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The life's greatest game thing. Wow. I could unwind on that for a little while. So,
let's do
it. It came to me in the form of a download with the help of some beautiful plant medicine called ayahuasca, which many of our listeners, I'm sure, have heard of. For those who haven't, it's a vine that's available in the basically South America, and awakens our mind. It releases DMT in the body, which allows us to have visions and get these downloads. And so that was what I received that night on ayahuasca, was that life is a game, and we've all been invited to play simply by being here on this planet. The day you were born was your first move in the game. And so each day we wake up is another turn at the dice. And there's nothing that says that you need to play the game the same way you did yesterday. So, and in that light, we're winning simply by being here. And if we can remove the shades that say that winning is something outside of us or somewhere down the road, then we can begin to accept that every day is amazing. Every day is a gift. Every day is winning. And the fact that life is a game allows us to start seeing it as fun. We all have challenges. We all have these personal hurdles and obstacles that are in our path that we want to move out of the way or jump over or figure out how we minimize them. But that's the fun part. If it wasn't challenging, we'd be coasting. We'd be in our comfort zones. And that's, as we know, not a place where we're going to find any level of growth. So playing the game each day in a way that feels like you're showing up for yourself, really gives us permission to get creative and be creators in our life. So that's kind of the first little snippet of that.
The first little thing, it's like the day you were born, your life begins, right? And it was like, it's like, they always say, there's this saying about like, you really can't control the hand that you're dealt. right? So that kind of like, I can see how that like gets coincided with that, you know, or like whatever. But I love the idea of, if life is a game, then just make every day fun. Because for me, you know, that's definitely one of my foundational pieces, is that like, if you're not in your joy, if you're not in your pleasure, if you're not in your fun, then there's something here, you know. I mean, obviously there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? We're not always just going to be like, but you know, if you're in the majority not in that flow, not in that joy, that fun, right? I mean, that's what life is for. That's what we're here to do, is to be in that magnetic attraction. And I think that's something else too, to kind of piece in with that, is that when we are in that fun, when we are in that game saying, I'm just going to have fun with this, like, we get more clients, we get more offers, we get more invitations, we, you know, we have more people like desiring to interact with us, be our friends, more dinner parties. Like, it's really like a fundamental piece of living in that soul, is having fun.
Yeah. The lens that is an illusion is that we're losing, you know, that we're behind, or that there's something outside of us that needs to be accomplished or achieved. And that is the first clue that you're not seeing life as this beautiful game that you're already winning simply by being here. You know, we are a piece of the universe. We are divine stardust, and each one of us is a god. And so you get to wake up and realize that. You realize your inner brilliance and play the game from that place. You know, there is no failure, there's only feedback, right? And so if we can take bigger chances, play a bigger game, follow our inner guidance, connect with it first, and figure out what it is that you desire most of all, and then follow that path, then you begin to receive these wonderful things from the universe. You are just as much a creator as the maker, right? And so so showing up for yourself in that same energy as someone who's able to create the change that you want to see in your life, it's not going to be done for you. Nobody's coming to save any of us. So we are responsible for that change in our own lives.
Totally. And taking on that self-responsibility, right? It does come with facing off with your current reality sometimes, you know. It's like, you know, facing off, like when, you know, in my story, right, when I got to the point where I was just like, wait, I'm here. Like, I had to face off with the belief that you know, that life is graduate college, get a job, get married, have kids, you know, like whatever. And if that is your life, and that is what you desire, I obviously I support that 100%. I think it's a beautiful thing. But then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, wait, is this actually a belief or a desire or a timeline that my soul actually wants? Or is that actually just a conditioning and looking out, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's one of the most annoying things for me in my life these days, is it's like, so when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? You know, I'm just like, I mean, and I understand that that's just, you know, it's not like malicious or whatever. And I totally get it. But, you know, it's that idea that these timelines have to be attached to within, and not just this societal idea, right? And like, really by opening up our hearts to that, and to allowing it to look different, and allowing to go through some of those uncomfortable conversations without it really affecting us, you know, different things like that, you know, it's beautiful on the other side of just being, you know, I'm a almost 33-year-old free spirit, you know, not married, no kids. And it looks a lot different than a lot of people, but it's also like exactly where I'm supposed to be. And like, I get that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That question, so when are you going to get married? You know, I think that's really somebody else asking for permission to know that they are following the right recipe, because you may not be. And so when they perceive that somebody else isn't, it's a check and balance. Like, hey, don't you know there's a recipe we're all supposed to follow? And that's the you know, I hate to, no judgment, but that's the unwoke person who's still in that place of like, I'm going to follow the recipe, and that's what success is. And so you start to carve out a different path for yourself. You start to follow your soul's inner guidance, and other people are a little bit creeped out by that. Like, who are you to go against the grain and to challenge the recipe that we all know is the way it's supposed to be? You should do this, you should do that. And so
shooting all over ourselves.
yeah, and it's our birthright and our job as coaches, but everybody's birthright to follow that inner guidance and to follow your own recipe, to figure out what that is, and to add the little bits of spice that make you feel wonderful and follow that joy.
Totally. And I think that, like, there's some women who were little girls and just dreamed of being a mom, right? And that's why they followed that path, and they followed that path and they followed that. There were some little girls who like hated Barbies, me, and, like just was like totally like out in nature, digging up worms and just never clean, like, and that, I think that when we talk about the conditioning and the things that we've moved into and out of, when we do look at that little the innocence within us, that inner child, which plays a huge role, as what we realize, as honestly, as coaches, is when you look back, like you can't do coaching without inner child work. Like it's really, really fundamental. And so I look back at that little girl and I'm just like, oh, like she was obsessed with Care Bears. She was obsessed with Pocahontas. She was obsessed with dirt, and so it's like, of course I'm going to be, really move into this kind of existence that's based on kindness, love, the colors of the wind, and being out in nature, right? Like I look back and I'm just like, holy shit, like what a direct impact that has on who I am as an adult, right? But that also shows me that I'm kind of following my soul. It's like sometimes when you look back at your childhood, if you're not attached to anything that you were doing there, that might just kind of be an inquiry to make, just somewhere to kind of look in and say, okay, like do I have any resonance to that little innocent, that pureness within me before the conditioning, got on top of that?
Yeah. That you brought something to mind there. There's that expression that success leaves clues. And when we're kids, we're basically exploring the things that we desire. Very seldom do kids do things they don't want to do unless they're told to do them. And so they're always doing things that are in line with their values. And as we get older, we get out of touch with those things often. And so if we look back to that child who was following their values, living life in accordance with their values, whether it's nature or love or affection or, looking at beautiful colors and whatever your version of that is, there's the clues to success. Then you got handed a recipe for what success really is, and you started following that. But we already know inside of us what those recipe for success is, because it's what we followed when we were young.
Totally. And I love that. It's like rewriting the recipe and adding different ingredients, right? It's like, that's another way it's like rewriting the recipe, and changing, unlearning some of the recipe that you're given, because ultimately, like it just makes sense. Like as humans, we all grow up, we learn this is appropriate, this is not, this is appropriate, this is not, this is the way that things happen here, and I think that we are in this new paradigm. We are in this new wave of saying, actually, before all of these recipes, before when we lived in smaller tribal communities, right? Before, we became such a big population, a big society of people, we did have a lot more intimate awareness of what that even looks like. And this is where kind of like when I talk about like we are really in this period of awakening, is because we are, we're coming into that new belief, this new paradigm of thinking that says, oh wait, like I do have more choices, infinite choices, essentially, right? Infinite choices to where I go from here and what I do with my life. Like I get to create that, but it takes unlearning that recipe. And even the first step is realizing that you're following a recipe, right? It's like, once you realize you're following a recipe, then you're asking yourself, is this the recipe that I actually desire to follow? And some people that are listening to this will be like, totally. I'm totally, this recipe is my recipe. It's not somebody else's recipe. And some people who are listening to this might be like, Oh man, I think this is my mom's recipe from her recipe book, you know, like, and not, or my grandma's recipe, right? And not my recipe. And so I think we figured out the title maybe of this podcast, right? Rewriting the recipe of your life. Like, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Or the rules of the game. You know, I think we get to this place where if we're lucky, we begin to realize that actually you can rewrite those rules. And part of the fun is in taking chances. You know, like we are programmed to think that taking chances is against the grain because we already know the rules. So why would we take chances? We should just follow the rules and do the thing and get the job and the 1.5, you know, blah blah blah. So then we open ourselves up to this idea that, well, we can play around with these things and there's no consequence. You know, don't harm people obviously, but beyond that there's really no limit to the freedom that we have to change those rules and make them work for ourselves. You know, that's, we are the game, you know, in some ways, and decoding ourselves and figuring out all the layers of programming or rules that we've received is a first step towards getting clear on, like, okay, well, once I peel back those layers, what's underneath? You know, that's what's really brilliant about life, is when you get to like let this inner person speak that's been quieted for all these years.
Totally. And I think that when I look into the work, right, and then doing the work, this is foundational, right? To really, I think that somebody, it might have been on a podcast or something, somebody said to me, like, what if none of the beliefs that you're holding in your head are actually yours at all, right? And the codes, right? The codes and the beliefs that you're desiring are all held in your body. And like you just have this kind of like resonance, this knowing, but they don't come with like the feeling of like a thought or a this, you know. It's just that kind of really deep connection to yourself that says, yes, this is the truth for me, you know. And it, you know, sometimes I can just feel like this pulsating or this vibrating or this energy, right? And this is another piece of the work that I know you do and that I also do, is that like when we start really understanding energy, right? Something that's non-physical, non-tangible, you can't touch it or feel it or whatever, but it's the most potent life force that we have, and it's the most influential experience of where we are, where we're going, what we're bringing into our life, and all of that. Like, I don't know, energy is just next level goodness.
Yeah, I think the energy that you have at any given moment is really defining your state. And when we're not in a happy place, it's usually because our energy's not in a happy place as well. And so we can wait and wait and wait for something outside of ourselves to shift that, or we can begin the inner work of, I'm going to shift this on my own, because way easier to do it yourself than it is to wait for that thing outside of you to change it. And lots of people chase those things outside of themselves because they're, you know, it's like candy. It's like quick and easy gratification, and it works for a short period of time, but it doesn't have lasting change. And when you can learn to do that for yourself, then you can do it at any moment, you know,
Yeah,
shift your state, change your energy.
totally. And I think that even that idea of, you know, when even deteriorating, taking away that idea that like when I get A, B, and C, I'll be happy, right?
Mm.
Like removing that as a thought pattern completely, right? Because that's an old way of thinking, and moving into this new way of thinking is, you know, internally, like when I'm happy, then I will receive A, B, and C, you know. And maybe it's not about happiness, maybe it's about neutrality, maybe, you know, we don't need to overemphasize any emotion as whatever, but, you know, really this identification of, we are a society that believes that these things outside of ourselves will bring us the internal satisfaction when we've had it backwards for so long.
Completely backwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like basically start with yourself, right? And then go from the inside out. Don't go from the outside in. And so begin with change your energy, change your vibration, listen to music, cook exciting foods, or do those things that light you up. When you've got a day off to yourself and you're doing those really fun things that kind of light you up. Travel does that. Music can do it. Food can do it. Time alone, reading a book, whatever those things are. Start there and then add in your desires, and you'll magnetize them towards yourself. When you're wondering, like, when is that thing coming to me? Well, you're adding this delay of, I can't achieve a change in state until that thing arrives. Well, what would it look like if you just started from the place of, I'm going to change my state, change my vibration, and then I'm going to begin to invite in the things that I desire. Whoa, like, very powerful, game changer.
It is such a game changer, because it's like, it's magic. It's literally magic. I use that word a lot in my business and in my content and in the way in my life in general, but it's like, that's the magic, right? That's the magic, is really understanding that whatever is within, what your internal landscape is the external. And it's like getting that right. And all of a sudden you're like a magnet. Everything is just kind of unfolding, and you're like, wow, how is this all happening? And it just kind of is, through that state of acceptance, and not being like, for a coach, like, I need to sell out this launch, I mean, and there's a lot of, and honestly, entrepreneurship is one of the biggest triggers, I think, to that experience, right? Because of, launching, and, you are successful, right? Back to that life is a game. You are successful regardless if your launch sells out, like, straight up. You're still a success. And you have to be able to manage that energy and understand that, and bring yourself from here back to here when everything feels like, oh, it's not happening the way I want it to. But I'm still successful, right? And just kind of bringing yourself back into that energy and recalibrating, and allowing the universe, allowing energy, allowing spirit to redirect you to where you're supposed to be going, which I think is what often happens a lot more in entrepreneurship than we realize. We're just, sometimes we're just being redirected into something different, something that actually is more in alignment.
That's the exciting part, when you can shed that's part of the programming too, right? Like, we all of a sudden, even the people that have done all the greatest inner work and are helping others to do that work as well, you now put on the hat of entrepreneur, CEO, coach, whatever title you're going to give yourself, and then you try and perform like you understand that label to perform, and then you've now all of a sudden got out of touch with you again. And so it's continuing, like you say, to return to yourself and get back to, like, who am I? Like, I can be a CEO, I can be a coach, I can be an entrepreneur, I can be an uncle, I can be a brother, I can be whatever those titles are, but start from here. Don't start from the title, start from your inner place, and then ask yourself, how do I want to be that thing, that title? And then you get to perform in the way that feels closest to yourself.
Yeah, to your heart, to your truth, right? And this is body-based awareness, is something that I teach, and I go really deep into, because our body is our truth. Our body is our soul. It is, it's the vessel that holds our soul, but it gives us all that information, right? In sensations and in movement and in just in different ways. And when we can connect with that body, right? Because that mind is a lot, the brain, once we understand the functional way that the brain actually works, it's crazy to realize how much of a program, a computer hard drive our brain is. Like, it totally is. It's such a hard drive. And it's just like, no matter what we're doing and the experiences that we're doing, it's like downloading. And then all of a sudden, when that experience comes up again, it's like, oh, I got to react, because I know how that downloaded before, and I'm going to use, you know what I mean? And so it's like, once we start realizing and detaching from, we are our brain, to our brain is a system that helps us exist, we can detach from that mind, that brain, and we can just live from that soul. Like that's such a big piece too.
Yeah, the mind is a tool, and I think it's an overused tool, and so it begins to play tricks on us. We get confused. We think that we've been put here to problem solve. Like everything's a problem, and so therefore I have to solve them. And it's merely a tool that we can employ. And when we're really in tune with our soul and our gut, our intuition, our heart's voice, all of those things that are kind of body-based awareness, as you say, we have a lot more information. Then when you employ the tool, it has less work to do. It has so much more data before you start employing the monkey mind. And the monkey mind is good, but it's also following a program, as we've talked about. And so it has its own set of rules, and it's trying to apply those rules to this problem we're trying to solve. But if we have a lot more information first collected from in here, then we don't have to do as much work with our mind. Then it's like it can be the tool that it's meant to be, which is like, okay, here we go.
Right. Totally. The tool that it's meant to be, but not the foundational piece of who we are. Right. And I think that that's the beautiful way to like differentiate the two, is like when we can see our brain as a tool and not who we are. Right. Right there. Like another boom nugget of like, take that, run with it, see what that feels for you in your body, and really like what that looks like. Because that's like next level transformation, like just coming. So good.
Yeah. And the brain's slow. The brain takes a long time to catch up to what our heart and our soul and our intuition already knows. And so when we overemploy the mind, we get to the result way slower. Whereas if we tune in internally, we can get answers almost immediately, especially when we've practiced doing that for a little while, sit in silence or meditate, or whatever mindfulness practice that you're employing. Then when we do employ the mind, it has less distance to travel. And if all we do is employ the mind, well, you're going to be waiting for a while, because it's calculating every single permutation that exists, because what we ultimately are trying to avoid is failure. And as we've already talked about, there's no such thing as failure. You're winning just by being here. So when we can remove that feeling of like there's failure that I'm trying to avoid, things get so much easier, so much easier.
Yeah, I love that. Right. I love that. If like, what would you do if you weren't afraid to fail? So much. You would do so much, because, and what if there's no such, right? And we can even reframe that. Like, what if there's no such thing as failure, which there ultimately isn't? We're succeeding just by existing, just by being here. One of the things that we kind of mentioned before that I'm like, yes, let's definitely dive a little bit deeper into this is, so when we talk about like raising our vibration, right? Like the frequency of the mind versus the frequency of the heart are two completely different things, right? And so the heart center frequency is the most powerful frequency that we can really hone in on. So like, just as like a little bit of some more value that we can kind of add to this, I was just really feeling into really understanding what it means to raise your vibration from going into your heart, and from using your heart as that stable point. Even in terms of as simple as gratitude practices, which are simple yet very potent and powerful. But really, for me, I've really been working into this idea of, no matter what experience is happening, how can I do it with an open heart? No matter if that experience is painful, is joyful, is stressful, whatever it is, can I maintain an open heart in that experience, to really learn on the deepest level, and to really be able to, transmute and work with that frequency of the heart. So I don't know if you do any work around this, and I'm sure that you probably know a lot about like that heart frequency. But yeah, that's something that I've really been keying into in meditation, is just like witnessing my heart going out of my body and out to the world, like in the frequency that if we all joined our hearts together in that, in that frequency, you can literally like I think it's like 5 feet. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's like 5 feet of frequency that the heart's resonant goes out from, which I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's,
There's like a negative and a polar kind of
yeah.
electromagnetic field that goes around the entire body, and we're in the middle of it, which is amazing to think that we're
Yeah.
these walking like heart orbs, and we're just emitting this like frequency of energy, and we're either doing that really well because we've channeled it and we're in this really wonderful vibration, or it's confused and offline a little bit. And so tapping into it's a magical practice for sure.
Yeah, totally. I love that you know, brought up the idea of like the torus, right? Like that's like the outward and the upward in the spinning energy. And really that's where the center of our energy field is. And so I just, you know, that's something that I'll do. Like if I'm having a day where I'm kind of feeling a little bit, you know, low vibe or a little bit like, okay, I need something, you know, because it's not like we do this work and then we're just like these cheerful buckets of sunshine every day, you know, like I like to make that my main way of being. But on days that I'm not like that, I'm okay with that. And I'm just able to kind of go into my heart and just use that to raise my vibration, to close my eyes and just help my field get bigger and bigger and allow nature to kind of pull that vibration in and just different things like that. So I just thought that was very important when we're talking about like the body and vibration and all of that we're really keying in on that heart space.
Yeah, and no doubt that's going to be some new information for some listeners, I would imagine. That what are you talking about? My heart does more than just beat, you know, and pump blood around my body. It's this amazing, you know, sort of creator of our being. You know, it's representative of who we are and allows us to kind of check in. You know, I think if you were to ask anybody if they're stuck, you know, trying to solve a problem or make a decision, you know, you can immediately imagine that the vast majority of people are living up here. And so that's going to take a while because they're trying to avoid failure. They're trying to make sure they please people. They're not trying to like rock the boat. And if you were to just have them, you know, go from the neck down and just ask, you know, what does your heart want? It's probably a very quick decision. It's when we employ the brain again that we slow it down and we chug, 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 you know?
Yeah, totally. Bringing awareness to that for me has been so brilliant too. It's like, you know, even, and I've told this story before. I don't think I've ever on my podcast, but you know, it's really funny how much information that our body gives us. But then it's even more, you know, like, oh, hilarious, funny, you know, what our mind attaches to it. So like one day I was sitting around and I just all of a sudden I had like this really like heavy feeling in my chest. And so I just had this heavy feeling in my chest and I'm just like, oh no. And then that heavy feeling in my chest went up into my mind and I was like, I have anxiety. And then I attached myself to that anxiety. And then I was like, and then all of a sudden I started to spiral into all of these anxious thoughts, creating all of these anxious thoughts because my body was feeling this way. And so then all of a sudden I'm like going into all these different things and I'm just like, oh no, because I don't experience anxiety that much. And then I burped. And then I laughed. I burped. I just burped. And I was like, oh, it was like a literal awakening experience in itself because I just burped and then I started laughing because I didn't have the awareness of my body at that moment to realize that like it was just air that needed to come out. And so what happened was I attached my mind to that sensation and created these stories of what it was when it was just my body just, you know, needing to get some air out. And, you know, and so like that tells us like how much it plays a role. Like our body's doing one thing, but our mind can be doing a completely different thing, you know, and we have to have that awareness and have that mind body connection to be able to like really step into what's actually happening here. Because we have a lot of we can do a lot of creating stories in our head.
Well, and I think that's worth rewinding a little bit because you said something really powerful, I think, which is you had this sort of feeling of anxiety and you planted the seed in your mind, and then your mind created a reality of anxiety. Well, aren't you a powerful creator? right? And then to put that into context is to say, what if you planted a different seed in your mind every
Mm.
moment, every hour, every day, and told yourself that life is amazing, I am grateful, I am joyful and abundant, and then you led your life from that place. You would create the reality of that thing, and everything else would follow suit. But when we're picking up on these like things that feel off and we're afraid, that's kind of fear-based mentality, that's the reality you create. So your state at any given time is your life. And I think people don't realize, like, my life sucks. Well, your state sucks. And when you shift your state, like, I'm having a great day. Well, life is amazing when you're having a great day. How do you string more of those together with fewer of those pendulum swings back the other direction? And so powerful creators can create powerful, kind of outcomes in their life just by knowing that planting the seed is all you needed to do.
Yes, to that, breathing that in so deeply, because I love that. And we hear that, but like you just literally gave me a visual for what it means to create your own reality, right? Because that's like a buzz phrase in our field, and in consciousness and spirituality. But that right there, like, totally allows me and the listener to just kind of really experience and understand what creating your reality really means. So good.
Yeah. So often we get stuck in creating the reality that isn't serving ourselves. And so if you can highlight that for somebody, that the reality you're experiencing right now is one you created for yourself, right? Then you can kind of flip the switch the other direction and say, what would it look like to create a different reality? Because you did this. You are responsible for the state that you're in right now. You're also responsible to try and change it. And you have the power. You are that God divine creator, and you can create that in your own life. That simple, right? And the people that are wondering, why isn't my life more joyful? Why aren't I happier? Typically, it's because you're not letting yourself. There's something important about not being happy. You've told yourself a story that, being that would mean something else. I'm sacrificing this, that, or the other. And so that's typically how simple it is. Just allow yourself to be joyful, to be grateful, and to shift. And all of a sudden, you're creating a different reality for yourself.
Totally. So powerful. And I think, like, yeah, there's so many things that the listeners are going to take away from this podcast, but really understanding, planting that seed, being a powerful creator, rewriting the rules of your life and really living in that soul purpose, right? These are some very fundamental, beautiful, beautiful things that Jonathan and I brought together today. So Jonathan, I'm so thankful for you. I'm so honored that you came onto this podcast. In the show notes, you will have all of his information, how to work with him, where to find him. Get in this guy's energy. You will absolutely love it, and you will not regret experiencing Jonathan deeper.
Oh, you're so kind. Well, I've had a really wonderful time. Thank you so much for having me on. Always great to connect. And yeah, everybody get out there and create the reality that you want to see in your life. It's only for you to change.
Totally. So good.
Play the game.